Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another edition of Friendly Arguments. And please welcome back to the channel, friend of the channel, Mr. Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation. Peter, always a pleasure to have you on the channel.
Great to be back, Bicycle Legs. Thanks for having me on.
And Peter and I have done a few of these friendly arguments now. But this one in particular, we're going to be turning the tables a little bit because the last couple of friendly arguments that Peter and I have done, he's been the one arguing that the album wasn't very good, and I've been the one arguing that it's actually pretty good. We're going to be doing it the other way around today. Peter's going to be defending the album that we're talking about, and I'm going to be the one who's saying I don't like it very much. And the album we're going to be talking about is a bit of an Australian icon, isn't it, Peter? We are going to be talking about Wispering Jack by John Farnham. Came out in 1986, is, as far as I know, still the best-selling album by an Australian artist in Australia. It sold 1.73 million copies in Australia. It is 24 times platinum. Those are just out there numbers.
It's gobsmacking, isn't it? And if you put it by capita, by population, it'd be up there with Thriller, wouldn't it? In
Yeah,
America.
absolutely. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
it's 24 times platinum. So if that was in America, that would be 24 million sales. So,
yeah, absolutely.
you know, so we're going to be talking about this album. And I don't normally do this with these shows, but in this particular case, I feel like I need to start off with a little bit of a disclaimer because John Farnham is an institution here in Australia. And he's also, I think, got a pretty fairly earned reputation as being one of the nice guys of the Australian music industry. That's his autobiography, and I've heard it's a really good read. Um, so I want to make it clear right from the outset. When I'm criticizing this album, I'm criticizing the album. I am not criticizing John Farnham, the human being, because I think he's a great guy. I think all of us think he's a great guy. I'm not even necessarily going to be criticizing John Farnham, the singer, because I think his singing on this album, for the most part, is really, really good. What I'm probably going to be criticizing are two things in particular: the production and the songwriting. And even then, it's going to be up and down as to where I feel those particular things are. So tell me, Peter, I believe this is a fairly recent revelation to you that this album is a better album than you thought it was.
Yeah, I agree. In the day, I guess there was a lot of John Farnham mania, and you had the big hits that were just played to death in the clubs and on radio. And I couldn't sort of say I was a huge fan, but later in life, just listening to some tracks and I think it might have been some of our Australian shows that I did on Daydream Nation, where I sort of did a show on John Farnham being an artist that should have been much bigger overseas than he was, and being a bit of a head scratch. I went down the route of just purchasing it on Spotify and listening to it and thinking, gee, this is not bad at all. It's I wouldn't say it's a classic, but the premise of this show is I'm going to defend it, that it's nowhere a stinker. And I can sort of understand how this album single-handedly resurrected John Farnham's career, because John Farnham, pre-1986, 85, 84, he was dead in the water. He was
Hmm.
playing RSL clubs or pubs where there would be only 10 people. And basically, to make this album, he had to mortgage his house, or I think his manager, Glenn Wheatley, had to mortgage the house. Nobody wanted to touch him with a 10-foot pole.
Hmm.
Radio didn't want to play him. There was just a lot of adversity. And I think there's a whole swell of goodwill and an underdog story that makes this album, so, gives a lot of warmth to a lot of people. So I think we've got to try to separate the music and the person, and
Yeah, absolutely.
try to remove our biases, because he is an Australian institution, and
Hmm.
try as best we can to talk about this album by not knowing about John and his history with Australia. You know, forget about Sadie the cleaning lady, raindrops keep falling on my heads, the king of pop,
Mm.
Bobby Dazzler. You know, as I said, he is a quadruple threat. He's been on TV, he can sing, he can dance, he can do everything. But we've just got to try to remove that bias and have a meaningful discussion as a, you know, an Australian
Yeah.
artist and a record.
And of course, in the early 80s, he was the lead singer for the Little River Band as well. He took over from Glenn Shorrock for 3 albums.
Yeah, and our colleagues on the Contrarians, Sea of Tranquility, etc., they do have a recognition of John Farnham, mostly for that Little River Band because it did have a little bit of impact. So
Mm,
there is an awareness of John Farnham, the artist, but probably not as much as the Australian folk.
yeah. So, as usual, we're going to go through the album track by track. Peter will give his thoughts on each song, and then I'll sort of give my comments and that sort of thing. And it starts off with one of the most well-known songs off the album, which is "Pressure Down." What are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's a song that got overplayed in the time, and I got sick of it. To be quite
Mm,
honest, sick of the video clip, sick of the song, but listening to it with a fair amount of distance, I don't mind it. I think it's bright, it's punchy, it's catchy, and really the lyrics sums up the whole ethos of John Farnham in this album, where the pressure was down. This was like his last roll of the dice. His back's against the wall to put a record out and have some sort of commercial success, because this is the Lazarus of Lazarus stories of
mm.
career resurrection, isn't it? Bicycle legs.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I actually, listening to this album, preparing for this show, I thought I was going to, start off with Pressure Down, and I was going to be like, oh, I hate this song, all that sort of thing. This song's actually better than I remember it.
It's bright, isn't it? It's
Yeah, it
punchy.
is. It's probably, and as I said earlier on, I'm going to have a lot of issues with the production on this album, but I actually,
Ross Fraser did the
Ross
production, didn't he?
Fraser, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I think this sort of mid 80s production, lots of Fairlight and that sort of thing that's on this album benefits this song rather than, I think it's a detriment on a lot of the other songs that we're going to talk about, but I feel like it
Perhaps.
actually works with this song.
Mm,
As you say, it's catchy, it's bright, John sings great on it.
yep.
Um, like you, I absolutely got sick of this song back in the day because it got to number 4 on the singles chart, but more than that, it was on the singles chart for so long that in 1987, it was the number 16 seller of the year.
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know,
And just to, this was the first single off the album in America. So
mm,
were you a little bit surprised to hear that? Do you think that was probably a misjudgment? Because I've done another show on my channel about record companies that just screw up and weren't very good. And I think it might have been RCA. Do you think that it was a good decision that they put a tester with this song and not You're the Voice?
I don't know. I think, like, look, if anything was going to be a success, I think it was probably You're the Voice, but I don't know the American market. No, I wasn't
Mm,
following it at the time. So,
mm.
I don't really sort of have opinions from back in sort of 86, 87. But
But when you
um,
listen to the whole album, I think "You're the Voice" is the one that just puts its hand up and say, "This is the song that." And we'll talk about this shortly. But I
yes,
just found it unusual that they would start off something that is sort of a little generic with a lot of other songs that were in the charts in America. You would do something
yeah,
that's something a little bit different and um, stands out from the pack. That's what I'm a bit of a head scratch with the record company, I would say.
yeah. I feel like in 1987, which is when this would have come out in the US, I don't think that a song like Pressure Down, a sort of, synth poppy single, lots of Fairlight, drum machine, that sort of thing. I don't think that's what was really gaining a lot of traction on the US charts. Maybe more here in Australia and in the UK, but I don't know that that was, yeah, I don't know that it's the right way to go for the US market in
Or a
'87.
middle-aged singer with a being resurrected. Maybe if it was a Whitney Houston or somebody that was a soul singer singing this
Mm,
song, they could probably sell it and get it up to the top of the charts. But I think it would have been a very difficult thing for a John Farnham as the first single to
yeah.
break into the American market with this song. But I like the song. It's bright, it's punchy, it's catchy.
Mm,
But in the day, oh boy, was I sick of this song.
yeah. Speaking of songs that we were probably both absolutely sick to death of, the second song is You're the Voice. It is, it was a massive number one smash hit here in Australia. It was the number um, 14 seller of 1986 and the number 62 seller of 1987. So it had, like, again, chart longevity. And yeah, I mean, this song absolutely got played to death, didn't it?
It did. I didn't get sick of it in the day. I had an awareness of it, but over time, I've grown to love it because it is a very stirring song. And maybe it's a guilty pleasure, but I just think this is definitely the pick of the songs of this album. It's outstanding, and it's the absolute perfect vehicle for John Farnham. It's what an anthem should be: a slow build, it's stirring, and it has a crescendo, and the payoff is just emotionally swelling, and it pays off in spades. Um, when you look at the songwriters, you've got Andy Quanta, who was part of Icehouse, Keith Reid, Procol Harum, Maggie Ryder, and Chris Thompson from Manfred Mann Earth Band, who wasn't a fan of Farnham. He didn't want Farnham to touch this with a 10-foot pole. So there was a lot of shenanigans that Farnham got this song and ran with it and turned it into a hit. And wow, I just originally the background to this song was that I think Thompson was going to go to an anti-nuclear demonstration in the UK, and he slept in. He overslept, and he felt really guilty. And it's kind of got a very political kind of lyric. It's about empowerment and how everybody's voice can make a stand. So the background to this song is very kind of socio-political. You know, being individual, every vote counts. But in the hands of Farnham, he's turned it into an epic, and it's something that's kind of a bit of a deity in this country. Um, the heroes of this song, and actually the hero a lot of this album, is David Hirschfelder. His keyboard work is just wonderful, and I think his arrangement of this song is beautiful. I'm not a big fan of the bagpipes. I always find that a bit cheesy, but I get stirred by this. Um, I don't know. Maybe it goes into that category, bicycle legs, of I can't explain, but
Mm,
I just think it's a bloody good song. And if you know the Farnham story and you know the adversity that he's had and all the shit that's been thrown at him and how his back was against the wall, I just think this song is a marriage to the narrative of what was happening in John Farnham's life. And that's why maybe I'm just going to play him off a break here and just
mm.
say, I'm not going to criticize it. I just really like this song.
Yeah. And I think most Australians would be in your camp as far as this song goes. I'm not. I got sick to death of this song in 1986, and I'm still sick to death of it. I never, ever, ever need to hear this song again because it got played so much. And I'm just a lot less forgiving of this song. That you talk about the bagpipes being cheesy. I totally agree. I think the hand claps, the synthetic hand claps at the beginning of it that run throughout the whole song are horrible. I don't like them at all. Um, I I understand the feeling behind the lyrics, but I feel like they're a bit cliched. We're all someone's daughter, we're all someone's son. How long are we going to look at each other down the barrel of a gun? I feel like I've heard these sort of sentiments 1,000 times before. Um, you know, um, the chorus, catchy as hell. It gets into your head whether you want it to or not. It's a real earworm, and that's not necessarily a compliment on my part. I don't necessarily like songs that invade my headspace whether I want them to or not. Um, you know, um, so it's a wonderful vocal performance, though I will
Oh yeah,
absolutely say. But yeah, it's just a
yeah.
song I have heard thousands of times, and I never, ever, ever need to hear it again.
Well, you've heard the song "Happy Birthday" to You 1,000 times. You don't get sick of that song. Anyway.
Don't I? Um,
No, let's pull it apart a little bit, and this is all part of this show. So the hand claps, which was a Fairlight sample of Glenn Wheatley's Car Door, I think it's got a bit of a drive to it, sort of propulsion moves it along. I like that. Um, the bagpipes, I think that, they could have gone for the easy route of a guitar solo, the Searing guitar solo, but I think it's a left root turn, and it kind of works. It's risky, but it works. And by the way, I didn't say cheesy. I said most bagpipe solos, I'm talking about you, Mull
hmm.
of Kintyre, um, are cheesy, but this one isn't. It is a fantastic vocal performance. It's compelling. And I think the lyrics are kind of, I don't mind them at all. Another song, now this could be heresy, and I'm sure I'm going to get a bit of bite back from you, but for some reason, this song always is in the same ballpark as Shout by Tears for Fears. I've been playing both songs, one after the other, and for some reason, I get the same gravitas and the anthemic feel of Shout. Now, I bet you're a huge fan of Shout by Tears for
I love that
Fears.
song. And you know what? Having said that, I would not be surprised if that's what John Farnham, David Hirschfelder, Ross Fraser were going for with this song. Where I would disagree with you is to whether it succeeds or not in getting that same sort of uh feeling and what have you out of it. I don't think it does. I mean, you obviously do. And that's the great thing about these shows is that we can
Yeah,
disagree about these things and still have a smile on our face.
yeah,
But
but I sort of put it in the same sort of ballpark as those. And as I said, I've been playing the two songs together, and I've been actually researching. I'm shocked that they haven't done a mashup because everything's kind of mashed up on YouTube these days. But look, it's anthemic, it's um, it's stirring, and look, maybe at the end of the day, it's just it's I've got an emotional connection to this song because I tap into the story, and here's the story, here's the book, and he's known as the voice, and maybe I give it a couple of I give it a bit of a break, but I think it
yeah,
is it's a decent song. But do you think that you don't like the song because you simply just um, heard it too much? Did you not like it when you first heard it, and you
I
got worn away over time, or it was an instant dislike? I don't like this
I
song.
I don't think I was a big fan of it when it came out, but I didn't have the visceral sort of
Ugh, yeah.
a feeling that I have with it now. You know, um, it's just like it was a struggle, doing this show. I was listening to this album preparing for it, and I could have easily skipped the first two tracks because I know them backwards, forwards, and sideways, but I
Mm,
didn't. But whenever You're the Voice was on, the urge to hit that skip button, oh, it was very, very strong. So yeah, I just look, I was never a fan of the song, but yeah, that sort of visceral reaction of just wanting to avoid it at all costs, that took maybe a couple of months of it just getting played over and over and over again.
mm. Well, that's the problem about certain songs that get overplayed, and Australia has a region of the world where when the crowd gets behind a song, it seems to stay in the charts for a long, long time.
Mm,
I remember, I'm a little bit older than you, Bicyclelegs, but I remember in '76, Fernando from ABBA,
mm.
that was on the charts for 16 weeks.
Yeah, I
And
was only a little kid, but I remember that.
and then that horrible, this is, I think you'll agree, that horrible song from Robin Hood, the Bryan Adams one,
Oh
Everything I
yeah,
Do.
everything I do it for you.
That
I despise that song.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to defend that, and I think that was like half a year. It seemed like it was at the
Mm,
top of the charts. So I think that when everyone gets behind a certain song, and this album would have appealed to everybody. So it would have been cross generational. It would have been your grandma, your auntie, your cousin,
mm,
your brother, your sister, everybody,
yeah,
and it just sold and sold.
yeah. So we get into some of the lesser known tracks now, and we start off
Yeah.
with the song One Step Away. So I'll be interested to see how you feel about some of these lesser known songs.
Yeah, look, it's got a bit of a Kraftwerk keyboard line. Um, Definitely use of the Fairlights. It's kind of bubbles along and a very engaging vocal. Nice phrasing by John, very smooth. It's an almost seamless performance, so I don't mind it.
Mm.
It's a decent song.
You know, when I was making my notes for this show, the comparison I had for this song was the band Swing Out Sister. You know, their song Breakout.
Yeah, I've got one of their
Um,
albums, one or two of their albums.
yeah.
Yeah.
It gave me those sort of vibes, you know, very contemporary for 1986.
Mm.
Um, but also hopelessly dated sounding. Like it sounds like it could not be from anywhere other than 1986.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. A lot of those synth albums of the mid '80s sound like, and ironically, a lot of the older synth albums of the early '80s don't sound dated and sound contemporary. Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
Like modern is dated, but less modern is contemporary. Go
I
figure.
I I blame the Fairlight for a lot of that. It was a tool
Aussie
that could be,
invention too. You corrected
yeah,
me on.
it was a tool that could be used wonderfully, but it was also a tool that was mercilessly abused in the mid 80s.
Oh my god, those synth stabs. Remember where
Yeah,
everything had that psycho synth stabs and sort of exclamation marks in songs.
yeah. And you know, one of the things that Fairlight was used for this album is the drum programming. And that is throughout this album is one of my biggest bugbears with this album is the drum sounds. I hate them. I really don't like the drum sounds on this album
Yeah, it doesn't
at
offend me.
all.
It
I
doesn't
think they
offend me, but I mean, I've seen Farnham live. He's a great performer. His band is crack, and it does. The songs are better with an organic band behind him and drummers, and the whole
yeah,
the whole shebang.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. Um but the one thing I will give this song is at least it has a real saxophone solo because a lot of the horns on this album are Fairlight too, and they're also awful. And we'll get into that with some of the other songs. But at least this is a real saxophone playing the solo. So, you know, I'll give it a point for that. Um,
You
it's
sure?
yeah, it's not a. I mean, the song itself is kind of lightweight too. It's not a particularly well written song, I don't think. But again, you know, John Farnham sings it well, but the production on it is just, yeah.
Yeah, I've got to throw a couple of things here. So, the majority, for our overseas audience, the majority of these songs are from other singers. So,
Mm,
they basically had a bag full of songs that they were going through to get the right mix for this album, and I think predominantly they got it right. But there was one song that they actually passed on that became a huge hit for another band, and that was Starship. We Built This City on Rock and Roll.
mm.
Interesting. Could you imagine Farnsey doing that song, Bicycle Legs?
You know, I couldn't because that song is a guilty pleasure for me. I know that song is horrible and I like it anyway.
I do
Um,
too. I do. I
but
agree with
but
you.
I
It is
know
the
it's
guiltiest of guiltiest pleasure.
because I know that song is rubbish, but I love it. So I
I
I,
think
I
I
can't
think
imagine.
I think Grace Slick knows it too. I think they all do.
Yeah. Um. Oh, what was their male singer's name? I can't remember his name. Is Mickey something or
Yeah, yeah, it'll come to
yeah.
me. I've got the
But
holds.
I actually kind of feel like he was the right male vocalist to have on that song because he was a little bit lacking in personality. Whereas John
Mm,
Farnham is he has a personality in his voice. And I don't know if that would have worked with a song like We Built This City. But
yeah. Anyway, that's a little bit of
yeah.
trivia.
So then we get Reasons, and this was actually the fourth single off the album. It didn't do very well on the charts. I think it only got to number 60 on the charts. Um, but it is one that got a fair bit of radio airplay back in the day because it was a single. Um, so yeah, what do you think of this one?
Um, Farnham's voice is expressive. I think Farnham is the hero of the song. He sings with conviction. He sells the song. I like the backing vocalists. They have a little bit of soul, and I think it's a decent song, but it's not anything great shakes. It's not
Mm,
a classic, but it's a decent song.
funny because I actually think this is one of the better songs on the album. So, um, I think it's a well-written song as opposed to some of
Mm.
the other ones we're going to talk about. And you know, we were talking about David Hirschfelder before. I do feel like he is responsible for much of the sound of this album, for better and for worse.
He's very
And
talented, but he has a tendency to be a little bit overblown.
yeah,
And
um,
he was in sorry interrupt. He was in
yeah,
LRB, wasn't he? He was in the later lineup,
yes, he was
playing
on
to
the
win.
last two albums, that the Playing to Win and the No Rains album.
So they
He's you
obviously had a connection, those two. And
and
look, I'll bring you over.
if you listen to those two albums, he's all over Playing to Win.
Mm.
Um, he's barely noticeable on No Rains. So obviously different producers, I think, and that sort of thing probably had a lot to do with that. I think of those three LRB albums that John Farnham did, Playing to Win's probably the one that sounds least like an LRB album.
It's new wave, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah. But David Hirschfelder, yeah, he's a very talented keyboard player, but I don't know whether he's a for me, again, talking about my personal opinions here, I don't know if he's a particularly tasteful keyboard player. And I know that a lot of I like Rick Wakeman from Yes, and he gets accused of being tasteless as a keyboard player, and I can hear that to a certain extent, but I feel like I get a bit of that with David Hirschfelder too, with some of the sounds he chooses and things like that. But I think he's actually not bad on this song. I actually like the sounds he chooses for the various keyboards on this song. I still don't like the drum sounds on this song, but there's a lot less of it on this song. There's a lot less of those programmed processed drums on this
I'll
song,
put
so
it.
it's a less offensive. So
I'll put it to you. Maybe it was an economic decision that they didn't have a drummer, and they did it because a lot of it was probably in a home studio.
mm,
As I said, they were on the bones of their ass putting this production. So maybe it was an economic decision not to have a live musician
yeah.
and to do it all on the Fairlight and program it, because I guess it's a lot easier to demo it off a Fairlight than having musicians and workshopping it. But I'm gonna this song going gone, right.
Mm. I
um
was just before we go on to that one,
oh
I was
yeah,
going to say the Fairlight's a pretty expensive piece of kit though. Like it
it
was,
it
it was
is,
like
and
20,
that's
30,000 dollars back in 1986. So, that'd be
yeah,
like about $100,000 now.
hence
So,
mortgaging his two rack house.
yeah,
But maybe that's where all the coin went. We've got no money left for the drummer.
yeah.
That's what
So
I'm sort of alluding to.
Going, Going, Gone closes out side one of the vinyl album.
Yeah,
So,
I don't quite get the hook on this song.
mm,
To me, I wrote it's a lot of technology, a lot of sounds, but it doesn't quite hang together. There's synth bass, it's all very overamped, but there's not a hook that I can bite into this one. So for me, this is not a song that I
mm,
really enjoy that much.
yeah. Well, I'm gonna definitely agree with you on this one. I feel like the beginning, like the intro of this song, it feels like they used just about every 1986 gimmick they could think of. You know, let's throw every sound that you can make on a Fairlight at the beginning of this song. And then the song itself, it was written by John Farnham, Ross Fraser, and David Hirschfelder, and it's flimsy. It's a really flimsy song.
Mm.
Um, it's the synth brass on this song is just horrible on the chorus. It's just yeah. Oof.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not a big fan of the synth brass, and there was a lot of
yeah.
synth brass used in that era. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's up tempo and it's happy sounding, but there's just not much more to this song than that. And as
mm,
soon as it's over, I've pretty much already forgotten that it exists. That's how much of
mm,
an impression it leaves on me.
okay.
So we start side two with No One Comes Close.
Well, we've got some rock royalty here. Eric McCusker. He's not shabby.
Mm.
He's a very good writer for Mondo Rock. Um, Look, if you take away the 1987 veneer off this song, it's a decent song. And McCusker is very good at writing sophisticated pop songs. I mean, he's part of the engine room of Mondo Rock that were you know, they wrote great, sophisticated adult pop songs. So reminds me of very late 80s Mondo Rock. And I like it. I'll give this a tick. But
Yeah.
take away the 1987 veneer, the sounds, and
Mm.
yeah, it's a decent song.
Yeah, it's almost exactly what I had in my notes. I said this sounds like a mid 80s Mondo Rock song. I also mentioned that that's not necessarily a compliment in my book. I tend to prefer earlier Mondo Rock. I like the late 70s, early 80s Mondo Rock the best. You know, Chemistry and Nouveau Mondo. A song from Nouveau Mondo will be coming up when we talk later into this album. Um, yeah, it's not an awful song. Not like some of the other ones that we've talked about, in my opinion, again. Um, you know, Eric McCusker, good songwriter.
Yeah,
But yeah. And again, great vocal performance from John. You know, I can't stress
absolutely.
that enough on these, even the songs I don't like on this album. John Farnham still sings them really, really well.
Well, there was a quote, and I've done a little bit of research on this because sometimes you get these hyperbole quotes, and you think is it bullshit or not. But apparently, Freddie Mercury said he was the best vocalist in the world, and I've read a couple of um, articles, and that seems to support that was a real statement. So that's pretty high praise indeed.
Yes, it is. I'm not sure I would necessarily agree with Freddie. I think probably being overly modest there, but no doubt about the fact that John Farnham has a great set of pipes on him.
Absolutely, and he was sought after. There were a couple of outfits that were interested in his talents, like Deep Purple. I heard, I think even Van Halen. I don't know about the Van Halen because I think Van
Mm.
Halen had their. They were looking at everyone, and I always hear a rumor that somebody was auditioning for Van Halen, but definitely there was interest with Deep Purple when they fired um, Ian Gillan,
Mm.
and eventually that went to Joe Lynn Turner. So John Farnham was in the frame. But there you go, Freddie saying that.
Yeah.
So that's high praise indeed.
So the next song is Love to Shine. Um, I'll be interested to see what you think of this one because I've definitely got opinions on this song.
Yeah, look, he does sell the song. Is it memorable? Not sure. It's got a little bit of gospel. It's got a bit of R&B. Um, to me, his vocals are the real most valuable player on this particular song. But the song itself, I'm not sure if it's totally memorable.
Mm. It's definitely not the best song on the album, but at least there's a bit of funk to it, you know? I like that about it. What I don't like about it is the female backing vocals on this song. The ooze I find really cloying. Um, the drums aren't as bad as on this song as there are on some of the other songs, and there is a nice little guitar solo on this song, which I rather like.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
Brett Garside, he was a bit of a guitar hero, or is a
yeah,
guitar hero. His work on this album is very tasty. He's a
and
very good guitarist.
yeah, and John gets some great gospel inspired sort of vocals at the end of it.
Mm,
So he gets to really sort of shine at the in the sort of last minute of the song. But yeah, not one of the more memorable songs on the album. I think we can agree on that. But I probably don't dislike this song as much as two or three of the other ones we've already talked about. So,
yeah. So can we do a little bit of a barometer check so far? I think we're kind of
hmm.
agreeing with a bit here. It's not turning into a friendly argument. It's turning into a friendly agreement session, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we
Well,
definitely disagreed on You're the Voice,
yeah,
and
that's the main disagreement. That's I don't understand where you're coming from there, but that's fine. You know.
yeah, and I think you like No One Comes Close better than I do, and I think you liked One Step Away better than I did. But
Yeah, but it's not as divergent as I thought we might have been. So
yeah.
there you go.
Well, then we get into Trouble, as in the
Trouble,
song Trouble. We're not in trouble, hopefully.
not
We'll find
Elvis
out when we
Presley
read the
trouble.
comments. But um yeah. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Oh, it's a bit of a conventional song, girl chorus, um, but it sort of takes a left turn towards the second half of the song, and it kind of amps up. To me, I love the guitar work of Brett Garside. He's very tasty on this song, so that's a little bit sugary. Um, yeah, I'm not. It's okay.
Yeah. I'm not going to say this song is okay. I'm going to say this song is terrible. Um, the drum track on this song is especially awful for me. I think it's probably the worst drum track on the whole album, and that is saying something because I don't like any of the drum tracks on this album. Um, you know, and John doesn't even sing the first half of each chorus. It's some anonymous, background vocalist singing the first half of each chorus. Like, what's up with that? Um, Terrible choice to do that. Um, and just a very annoying sounding. Yeah, the
Yeah,
background vocals again. Horrible, horrible,
yeah.
horrible.
Well, that's where we probably disagree because you're getting a little bit annoyed. You're
Mm,
getting a little bit
well,
angry and annoyed. So I
yeah.
can see that there's fatigue
Mm.
starting to wear you down, and
Well,
you
and
you
again, you were probably mentioning this, but I find it more so. This song in particular is very lightweight. I will agree with you that it's partially rescued by a very tasty guitar solo.
it is
Um,
indeed. But I'm looking at
but
the bright side.
that's probably the only thing this song has going for it in my mind is that guitar solo.
Well, I'm looking at the bright side. It's got John. He's singing well. It's got Brett on it, but I can tell um, the fatigue is starting to get. You're getting a little bit scratchy.
Mm, mm.
Yeah,
But then we get a touch of paradise. And I have a feeling we're going to agree on this song more than we disagree. So,
Ross Wilson, Australian
mm,
legend, great songwriter, great singer. I like this song.
yeah. Well, I might be a little more effusive even than you because this was on, like, Mondo Rock did this on Nouveau Mondo in 1982, if memory serves me correctly. And I think this is an undeniably lovely song. I think it's the highlight of the album.
Yeah,
So,
he doesn't
um,
oversing it, and
mm,
that's another thing that I want to talk about. John singing, he doesn't over sing on this album, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because there has been a criticism of a lot of his past vocal performances where he showboats it a little bit. But on this
Yeah.
album, he does work vocally within the confines of the song, and I think vocally it's 10 out of 10.
Well, yeah.
He does it within the songs, and his interpretation of this song is wonderful, sublime.
Well, yeah. I know you copped a bit of flack on one of our on one of the Australian panel shows we did when you said that he oversang on his version of the Beatles song "Help."
And I
I am
stand
go-
by that. I stand
and
by
I
that.
am gonna 100% stand by you on that. I think that I hate that version of that song
Yeah,
because it's just histrionic showboating, and I think John Farnham is better than that, and
yeah,
he shows it on this song because this is a really good Mondo rock song, but John Farnham makes this song his own.
yeah. I
You know?
copped a bit of flack, but I call that the RSL note, where at the
Yeah.
end, and he's trying to, and there's some sort of conjecture that John Lennon always wanted to do it as a ballad. Well, I don't think he would have wanted it to be sung in that sort of way.
No.
Um, but yeah, I stand by everything I've said in that
Yeah.
because I
Absolutely.
love John Farnham. He's a great
Mm.
singer, but his interpretation of that one, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't agree with that one.
But this one, to me, best song on the album.
Polissimo. Well, You're
Yeah,
the
that's
Voice, but it's just behind maybe You're the Voice. I don't know.
but and just one last little point before we go on to the closing track of the album. There's a lovely little soprano sax solo on this song, and I really, really like that.
Yeah,
So
it wasn't a huge hit, which was a bit
no, number
strange.
24.
Yeah. Um, who who that's a bit of a head scratch. But
Well,
this is a signature song
yeah,
in his song list
you
when he
know
does live.
the main reason I think maybe this single didn't do as well was probably by this stage, pretty much everybody owned the album by now. So,
Yeah,
they probably weren't going out to buy the single because, he'd already sold over 1 million copies of this in Australia alone. So,
yeah. Everyone had this album except Bicyclelegs' family.
absolutely, we never did. It's actually
That's
true. We never owned
had
this
a
album.
stop sign on his door. No John Farnham here, please.
So we finished the album with a song that John Farnham writes all by himself, which is a song called Let Me Out.
I like it. I put Tangerine Dream, Kraftwerk Workout. Um, it's kind of a playful vocal, bit loose, punchy, left field. I don't mind it. It's something a little bit different.
Yeah. It's very 1986 sounding. I actually kind of like the intro. The
Mm,
song itself is pretty by the numbers, you know. It's no great shakes as a song. I like the moodiness of the verses, but you've got those awful, awful synth horns in the choruses, and I hate those to death. Um, it's not worst song on the album, definitely not. So, John Farnham was not a renowned songwriter. He was mostly somebody who interpreted other people's
correct,
songs.
correct.
Um, and yeah, I like the verses. The choruses are very mid 80s cliche to me, and I that kind of ruins the song for me.
Yeah, look, we are, a couple of older blokes talking about what's happening in '86 and the synth horns and this and that. I mean, how can you have perspective in when you're there
Mm,
in the time and in the charts? You've got Robert Palmer, you've got Machinations, you've got Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and everybody's using technology, and
mm.
they're just peppering every single track on an album with sound. How does anybody have perspective that less is more? It's just easy to talk in 2024 and say, oh, it sounds so dated and sounds so
Yeah.
1986. But, how can you tell people at the time that shoulder pads and mullet haircuts weren't going to be around? How can you tell folks that there's a tidal wave called grunge and Nirvana, and the dinosaurs of the earth are going to be extinct? It's
Yeah.
hard. You just can't. You know, Glenn Wheatley was a fantastic manager
Mm.
because what he did with John Farnham's career is a testimony, and I think that this album, and it's probably its flaw, has got one foot in commerce, meaning we've got to sell records. What's in
Mm.
the charts? What are the sounds? Let's use it.
Yeah. Look, absolutely. But the thing is, in 1986, this technology was absolutely everywhere in music. Some people used it a lot better than others. And, you know, even then, I go back to these albums, from 85, 86, 87. Some of them have aged okay, some of them have not aged well. To me, it's not a case of whether this album's aged well or not. I didn't like it in 1986, and I still don't really like this album very much. Uh, and the criticisms I'm making of it now, I may not have been able to make them in quite the same way because I didn't have the benefit of, nearly 40 years of hindsight. And I certainly didn't have the language to do it at the time because I was the ripe old age of 15. But I would have had more or less the same opinion of this album in 1986 as I do now, which is that, yeah, it's just, I think there's a lot of frills, a lot of decoration to this album over some songs that really are barely there.
Yeah, that's a bit
There are
harsh.
some,
I think there's some decent songs on the album. Yeah, there's a lot of padding. I'll put it to you. Do you think if instead of a Ross Fraser they did a Trevor Horn, would have been different?
uh,
Because he's my favorite producer easily of the 80s, and he had the magic touch. And I know Trevor
yeah.
would have brought in some strings, real strings.
Mm.
That
Yeah,
would
I
have
think
been might
Trevor
have been a bit
Horn.
different.
Well, look, Trevor Horn is no disrespect to Ross Fraser. Ross Fraser did some decent work with Skyhooks in the early 90s. Um, but I mean, Trevor Horn is, he's one of the greatest producers of all time. And would he have done a better job? Absolutely. But I think, that's not necessarily a slight on Ross Fraser as it is much just a testament to how good a producer I think, and obviously you as well, think that Trevor Horn is. I definitely think some real strings would have improved this album. But for me, I don't think every song on here is rubbish. I think I've made that absolutely clear. But there's probably 4 or 5 songs on here that I think are pretty lightweight and like have a lot of, you know, 86 Fairlight bells and whistles on them that if you strip those away, you're not left with an awful lot. So,
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of albums in the 80s where there was usually 4 or 5 strong songs and the rest was filler. So
yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't
I
think
mean,
there's anything.
I don't no, I don't think there is
Mm,
anything particularly unique
yeah.
about that, but they're not the albums I was buying and they're not the albums I'm listening to, 35, 40 years later. So,
Yeah, but a lot of folk are still listening to Farnham,
yeah,
but I
absolutely.
would suggest that they would be listening to 3 key songs, and that's "You're the Voice," "Pressure Down," and "Touch of Paradise," and
Mm,
maybe 1 or 2 of the others that we've discussed. But the rest of it, I think, skip, skip, skip.
yeah. And probably like the only other one I would really think has sort of stood the test of time for anybody, not necessarily for me, because I don't think I liked it at the time either, is the title track of the next album, which was Age of Reason.
I like that song.
Yeah.
You don't?
But yeah. So there you have it. Those are our thoughts on Whispering Jack by John Farnham. Please, for all of my non-Australian viewers, Go and have a listen to this album and tell us what you think in the comments, what your thoughts on this album are. Because, this is very much an institution in Australia, and it did sell well in Europe. But outside of that, it wasn't a particularly well-known album. It didn't do anything in America. Um, and even in Europe, it did well at the time, but I don't know if it stood the test of time in Europe the way it has here in Australia. So please, if you've never listened to this album, go to your listening app of choice, give it a spin or a couple of spins, and let us know in the comments what you think. Are you more on sort of Peter's idea that this is a pretty good album, or are you more on my?
Not pretty good. Good album.
Mm,
I'll bring it back. It's a
mm,
good album.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let us know in the comments what you think. If you've never listened to this album before, or if you're an Australian and you know this album backwards, forwards, and sideways like we do, let us know in the comments what you think of Whispering Jack, because we'd love to know. So, Peter, always a pleasure to have you on these shows.
Absolutely. Give me your address. I'll send this as a little Christmas present, a little bit of holiday reading for you. See, John's looking at you.
If there is the slightest possibility that any of my viewers are not already subscribed to Rock Daydream Nation, please go and correct that immediately. There will be a link down below in the video description, so please do go, and there's a lot of great content on there, a lot of great Australian content, which thankfully Peter asks me to be on some of the time, which I love. So, yeah, definitely go and give Peter a follow if you already haven't. Please do like, share, and subscribe here. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to see Peter and I argue about a couple of other albums, I have a playlist for all of our friendly argument shows. If you want to see some of my studio albums ranked shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, like Rock Daydream Nation, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter, and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated bicyclelegs Facebook page. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
See you later.